James Turner didn't ask for a war. He just wanted a quiet place to live after the mess of his divorce, something calm, suburban, maybe even boring. Oakridge Heights offered just that. Wide sidewalks, neat hedges, and a promise of order. But order had a name here, and it was Karen Muldoon. James had barely finished unpacking when he caught his first glimpse of her. Karen, in all her glory, short blonde hair, tight lips, mirrored sunglasses, and a walk like every step declared war on grass stains. She scanned new residents the same way airport security scanned. Luggage, suspiciously and thoroughly. James, unfortunately, came with baggage. Not emotional, mechanical. His restored 1969 Mustang Boss 429, deep blue and beautiful, rumbled into Oakridge like a lion among lapdogs. He'd spent years restoring it, and he wasn't about to hide it in a garage like a forgotten Christmas decoration. The first words Karen ever said to him weren't hello or welcome to the neighborhood. They were, "You need to move that." He looked up from waxing the Mustang, half smiling. "Excuse me? That car? It's in your driveway. Driveways are for temporary parking." HOA Regulation 17B. James stood, wiped his hands. "I'm not in the HOA." Karen's eyes didn't blink. "Your street is within the boundary. I double-checked before I bought this house. My parcel is outside the whole line." The realtor confirmed it. "The deed says it, too." She smiled then. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "We'll see about that." She turned and walked off, heels clicking against the pavement like a gavel. For a moment, James just stared after her, confused. But he should have known. That wasn't a warning. That was a shot across the bow. 2 days later, he found the notice duct taped to his door. Violation. Improper storage of vehicle. $250 fine. Mandatory removal within 48 hours. James laughed. He crumpled the paper and threw it away. Surely this was a bluff. A mistake. He wasn't part of the HOA. But Karen didn't deal in mistakes. She dealt in persistence. Next came the emails, formal and smug. Then the neighborly visits, other board members knocking on his door, pretending to welcome him, while gently reminding him of the rules. James didn't back down. He emailed his property lawyer, confirmed the parcel. He even forwarded the official HOA boundary map to Karen with a polite note. "Just clearing this up. I'm not under your jurisdiction. Best, James." There was no reply, not that night. But the next morning, that's when everything changed. James stepped outside to find the Mustang had been attacked. The windshield was shattered, spiderweb cracks crawling across the glass. The driver's side mirror was dangling. And there, running across the hood like claw marks, were long, deliberate key scratches deep enough to gouge the metal. Angry, personal. A note was duct taped to the hood, written in neat, curling handwriting. "Move it. Last warning." James stood there, heart pounding, not just with rage, but with a calm, cold realization. This wasn't just HOA harassment anymore. This was war. And Karen had made it personal. But if she thought he'd back down, she didn't know who she was dealing with. James didn't just fix cars. He built engines. Engines built to outrun, outlast, and overpower. And now, he was building something new. A plan. One that would turn Karen's obsession with control into the very thing that would undo her, because she had crossed a line she didn't even know existed. And she had no idea how badly she'd just messed up. 2 days after the attack on his Mustang, James Turner wasn't just mad. He was focused. He hadn't touched the car yet. Not the scratches, not the shattered glass. He wanted the damage seen. Documented. Remembered. The security camera he'd installed when he moved in, it caught nothing. Someone had disabled it. Smart. Too smart for coincidence. Karen hadn't said a word since the incident. No gloating. No smug emails. Just silence. But the calm only made the storm louder. James could feel the pressure building in Oakridge Heights like steam under a lid. Then came the knock. Two men in cheap polos and cargo shorts stood on his porch. One held a clipboard. The other was already snapping pictures of the Mustang. James Turner? The clipboard guy asked. James stepped out onto the porch. You guys the welcome committee? The man didn't smile. We're with the Oakridge Heights Compliance Task Force. There have been multiple complaints filed about an unauthorized vehicle on your property. James raised an eyebrow. I'm not in your HOA. You're trespassing. The guy ignored him and kept talking. You violated residential visibility standards, obstructed neighborhood aesthetics, and refused to comply with corrective notices. This is your final warning. If the vehicle is not removed by Friday, we'll escalate to civil code enforcement. James didn't flinch. Get off my property. The clipboard guy looked annoyed. Sir, you're not law enforcement. You have no jurisdiction here. I've got survey maps, a signed title, and my own attorney. If you don't leave, I'll call the sheriff. And if you so much as breathe on that car, I'll press charges. That shut them up. The man with the clipboard muttered something into his walkie-talkie, and both turned and walked off. But not before the second guy gave James a look. The kind of look you give someone you think you'll be seeing again real soon. James stood at the edge of his driveway, watching them retreat like hyenas. Then he looked over at Karen's house. She was standing inside, behind the curtain, watching, not even pretending to hide it. James didn't wave. That night, James called his buddy Mike, an ex-Marine turned security specialist. I need a camera. Set up no HOA can touch, and something subtle. Mike chuckled. Subtle's boring. You sure? James grinned. Karen wrecked my car. Subtle went out the window. By the next morning, James had hidden motion sensors along the perimeter of his property, 2 micro cameras disguised as hummingbird feeders, and a dash cam embedded into the front grille of the Mustang, now repaired, but with 1 scratch left. Untouched on purpose. He even set up a decoy camera at the front door. Let them disable that one again. He wanted them to feel safe when they came back. And they did. It was Wednesday night. James was inside, watching a documentary when his phone pinged motion alert. 11:03 p.m. He tapped the feed and saw 2 hooded figures creeping up his driveway. One was carrying a canister. The other had a crowbar. James didn't panic. He hit record. And watched. The crowbar guy went for the Mustang's front tire. The one with the dash cam staring right at him. The canister guy started pouring liquid, probably paint thinner, across the back trunk. They moved like they'd done it before. Quiet. Coordinated. Fast. James watched, breath steady, as they did thousands in damage, all while grinning, under their hoods like they were untouchable. They weren't. Not this time. The next morning, James filed a police report. He gave the detective the footage, the timestamps, even enhancement of their license plate from the Hummingbird cam. It took 6 hours. By sunset, both men were in custody. And they'd talked. Turns out Karen didn't just report James to the HOA. She'd hired these guys under the table, called them maintenance contractors, paid them cash, and told them exactly what to do. The detective called James personally. She's in deep, he said. You want to press charges? James stared out the window at Karen's house, where the porch light flickered nervously like it knew something bad was coming. He smiled. Not yet. Because James wasn't done. Karen had crossed a line. And now, it was time for her to feel what it was like to be the target, to watch her world unravel one rule at a time. She wanted war. She just got drafted. Karen Muldoon didn't show up to the next HOA board meeting with fear in her eyes. She showed up in full armor, pearl necklace, blazer with shoulder pads sharp enough to slice drywall. She even brought homemade cookies, like she could sweeten the storm that was about to hit her. The board sat in the clubhouse's meeting room, fake ferns, folding chairs, coffee-stained carpet. Most meetings were dull, roof inspections, fence painting rules, arguments over lawn gnomes. But tonight's meeting was packed. James Turner had made sure of that. He'd sent anonymous flyers to every mailbox. Is your HOA president hiding? Crimes. He included screenshots from the surveillance footage, blurred faces, but obvious criminal activity. The kind you don't ignore. Every chair was taken. James entered quietly, taking a seat in the back. No clipboard. No fanfare. Just his calm gaze locked on Karen. The president of the HOA, a balding man named Phil Dobson, started the meeting with nervous energy. Okay, folks, let's keep things orderly. We're here to discuss community updates, including a recent incident involving one of our residents. Karen jumped in. Yes, I'd like to address that. There's been some confusion regarding a non-compliant vehicle, and its owner, Phil, cleared his throat. Actually, Karen, we've had a formal complaint filed with supporting evidence. Karen's lips twitched. Evidence of what? James stood up. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. I submitted video recordings showing two men vandalizing my property. They've since been arrested, and they confessed that they were hired by someone on this very board. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen went pale. James walked forward, calm and surgical. One of them gave a sworn statement. Said he was paid in cash by the HOA lady with the white dog and silver Honda. Sound familiar? Karen. Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her jaw trembled slightly, but she held it together. This is slander. She snapped finally. You have no proof of any money changing hands. These criminals are just trying to save themselves. Phil interjected. Karen, you didn't disclose any work orders or board-approved expenses. Did you authorize maintenance contractors to operate outside of HOA jurisdiction? Karen blinked. I was acting in the interest of the community. That car was an eyesore. James looked at her like a surgeon about to make the first cut. I'm not even in the HOA, he said. You knew that. You targeted me anyway. And now two men are in jail. You've committed criminal conspiracy. And worst of all, you've weaponized this board to feed your personal vendettas. A woman in the audience shouted, He's right. You fined me last month for having pumpkins out past Halloween. Another man chimed in. My kid got a warning for drawing chalk on the sidewalk. You said it was visual clutter. Suddenly the air turned. Phil held up his hands. All right, Karen. I'm suspending you from all board duties effective immediately. This is no longer just an HOA issue. We'll let the authorities finish their investigation. Karen's voice broke. You can't do this. I built this neighborhood. I enforced the standards. James leaned closer and whispered just loud enough. And now you're the standard everyone wants to bury. The room fell into silence as Karen grabbed her purse and stormed out. The click of her heels, once a sign of power, now sounded like a retreat outside. She fumbled with her keys. James didn't follow. He didn't need to, because this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about principle. But what James didn't know, not yet, was that Karen wasn't going quietly. The HOA was just one battlefield. And Karen, she had a few cards left to play. Ones that weren't legal, weren't ethical, and definitely weren't in any HOA handbook. But the worst part, she wasn't acting alone anymore. 3 days after the HOA meeting imploded, Karen vanished. No porch walks, no peeking from the blinds, no aggressive notes on doors. Just silence. James thought it was over. For a moment, peace returned. He detailed the Mustang again. He grilled burgers. A neighbor even brought over homemade pie as thanks for bringing that HOA tyrant down. It almost felt normal. But on Thursday, things shifted again. Not loudly, not obviously, just wrong. James noticed small things first. A low, constant clicking from his phone when he made calls. Packages arriving late. One completely ripped open and resealed with different tape. Then came the visitor. It was late evening, and James was watching his security feed when a figure stepped onto his porch. A man. Not from the neighborhood. Not from the HOA. He wore a faded ball cap and leaned on the doorbell like it owed him money. James opened the door cautiously. The man didn't introduce himself. He just handed James a thick white envelope and said, "You don't know what you're up against. Walk away." Then he turned and left. James opened the envelope. Inside was a printed dossier. Pages of his personal information. His employment, history, home purchase records, VIN number for the Mustang, even emails he'd sent to the HOA. Someone had dug deep. And then he saw the cover sheet. Property surveillance authorization. Summit Ridge Management Group. James blinked. That wasn't Oakridge Heights. That was a private property management company. Larger, meaner, with real lawyers. And according to the printout, they were now consulting for Oakridge Heights HOA restructuring. James sat down hard. Karen hadn't given up. She'd escalated. She'd brought in corporate muscle. And they were watching him. He called Mike, the ex-Marine security buddy, and laid it out. They're building a profile. Mike said, they want dirt, leverage, anything to push you out. Why? James asked. I don't even belong to the HOA. That's why. You're proof they don't have control. If you stand, others might follow. Karen lost power. But now she's brought in people who don't care about bylaws. These guys play chess with lawsuits and whispers. James looked out his window. 2 SUVs parked across the street, new ones. No decals. No reason to be there. Both empty. Or maybe not. You think they'll come at me legal first? James asked. Mike paused. I think they'll make you paranoid first. Then they'll make you broke. That night, James didn't sleep. He reviewed the footage again. Every camera, every angle. And that's when he caught something. Frame by frame, he rewound the porch video. The man who delivered the envelope. In his back pocket was a laminated badge. Visible for one frame only. Summit Ridge Enforcement. Private security. Firm. Karen had outsourced her ward. And now, it was bigger than Oakridge Heights. It was a siege. The next morning, James found 3 more flyers in his mailbox, all anonymous. All it takes is one non-compliant property to tank home values. Who's really protecting our neighborhood? And the last, we handle problems. Quietly. The gloves were off. But James wasn't planning to hide. Instead, he called in a favor. His cousin, Olivia, was an investigative reporter out of Austin. Sharp as a razor and twice as stubborn. He sent her the documents, the surveillance footage, everything. Within hours, she called back. I know these guys, she said. Summit Ridge has been sued 3 times for extortion and harassment. They target neighborhoods with weak boards, insert themselves, and suck fees out like leeches. Karen didn't hire help. She invited predators. James knew what he had to do. He wouldn't just defend himself anymore. He'd expose them, and he had the Mustang, the cameras, the receipts, and now a reporter ready to blow this story wide open. But first, he had to push them, make them reveal their fangs. Because if they wanted war, James was going to give them one. Not just with force, but with firepower they didn't expect, truth, exposure, and something far more dangerous, publicity. By Saturday morning, Oakridge Heights looked like a postcard, sunny skies, trimmed lawns, and quiet cul-de-sacs. But beneath that calm, James Turner was preparing for war. He wasn't packing weapons. He was packing evidence. James had spent the last 2 nights reviewing every piece of footage, every scrap of information. His cousin Olivia had connected the dots. Summit Ridge wasn't just a management firm. It was a predatory HOA parasite known for exploiting neighborhood conflict to take control, raise fees, and file bogus fines. And now they were here. James didn't want a legal battle. He wanted a spectacle. So he created one. It started with a barbecue. James put flyers on every mailbox. Neighborhood peace cookout. Bring a plate. Leave the drama. Most people thought it was a joke. Some laughed. But by 6 p.m., 20 homeowners were on James' lawn, eating ribs, sipping lemonade, and swapping Karen horror stories. James made sure to be seen, laughing, shaking hands, even letting a group of kids pose with his Mustang. But what the neighbors didn't know, there were 5 hidden cameras pointed at the street. High definition, motion activated, streaming directly to a cloud server Olivia had secured. He wasn't just throwing a party, he was laying bait, and sure enough, the fish came swimming. 2 black SUVs parked across the street just after sundown. Same ones from before. They didn't get out, just sat there with engines running. Watching. James gave it an hour. Then, casually, he walked across the lawn, holding a plate of wings. He approached the SUV on the right and knocked on the driver's window. The man inside didn't roll it down. James smiled, leaned in, and said, loud enough for the mic in his shirt pocket to catch it, "You're being filmed. All of you might want to call your legal team." Then he turned and walked away. 5 minutes later, both SUVs pulled out fast, too fast. One clipped a mailbox and kept going. James made sure that part was caught on 3 cameras and uploaded instantly. The next day, the retaliation came fast. A fake citation was taped to his door. Unauthorized gathering. HOA violation. Fine. $1,000. James laughed. He called the number at the bottom. It didn't go to the HOA board. It went to a voicemail box for Summit Ridge Legal Affairs. That was the last piece. He forwarded everything to Olivia. The car footage. The surveillance, the fake fine, the veiled threats, the SUV footage. By Monday morning, she'd published a full expose titled "When Your HOA Becomes a Corporate Trap, One Man's Fight Against a Predatory Takeover." It hit every major regional news blog by lunchtime. And then the phone started ringing. Neighbors. Reporters, even board members who had quit under Karen's reign. Everyone wanted to talk to James, but not everyone was happy. That night, James got a knock on the door. Karen. She looked nothing like the queen of Oakridge anymore. Her hair was frizzy, her blouse wrinkled. No clipboard, no smirk. Just desperation. "You need to take that article down," she said. "You've made things worse. They're threatening to sue everyone. You think you've won, but you've made them angry." James didn't move. "You brought this on the neighborhood," he said. "All because I wouldn't hide my car. You don't get it," she snapped. "They promised me." She stopped herself. James stepped closer. "They promised you what?" Karen looked down. "Control." James stared at her. "You sold your soul for a title on a newsletter." She didn't deny it. She just turned and walked off into the dark. James knew it wasn't over. Because Summit Ridge didn't care about pride or position. They cared about profit. And now that their scheme had been exposed, they weren't going to walk away quietly. They were going to retaliate hard. But James wasn't afraid. Because while they were preparing lawsuits and dirty tricks, he was preparing something much bigger. Smoke hung over Oakridge Heights like a curtain of accusation. Karen's shed had burned to a crisp, leaving blackened boards and a melted bicycle tire resting like a crown on the ashes. Neighbors whispered, phones recorded, but nobody said it out loud. What they were all thinking. Did James set the fire? Karen certainly thought so. She stormed through the crowd in her robe, face flushed with rage and mascara running down her cheek like war paint. You think this is funny? She shrieked, pointing a shaking hand at James. You're behind this. You did this because you're a coward and a criminal. James didn't respond. He stood calmly near his Mustang, hands resting on the fender, not a drop of soot on his shirt. The same Mustang that had been vandalized, threatened, targeted, but never torched. Karen kept shouting. He wanted revenge. He hates this neighborhood. I want him arrested. That's when the sheriff's cruiser pulled up. Sheriff Dahlgren, a tall woman with a permanent squint from decades under the Texas sun, stepped out and surveyed the chaos. She didn't bother with Karen first. She walked straight to James. You James Turner? Yes, ma'am. I've got a few questions. Let's talk. Karen tried to interrupt. Arrest him. He's dangerous. Sheriff Dahlgren held up a hand like she was swatting away a fly. Ma'am, let me do my job. James followed her toward the cruiser, heart steady but guarded. If this was a setup, he needed to keep control. They stood under a tree while the crowd murmured behind them. You got security footage? The sheriff asked. Several angles. I've got exterior cams, motion triggers, timestamps, and remote backups. If someone lit that fire from my side of the street, I'll have it on film. The sheriff nodded slowly. Good, because the fire marshal says it started from inside the shed. Accelerant used. Gasoline, most likely. And it wasn't electrical. No wiring inside. James frowned. So someone started it from the inside. Yep. Question is who? Later that night, James handed over the footage. Nothing unusual, no motion alerts, no trespassers, no movement in his yard. His side was clean. The sheriff thanked him and left with the files. But what she didn't tell him was what she'd already found. A melted plastic gas can inside the ruins, and 2 charred documents inside a fireproof box. One of them had James' name on it. The other, a lease agreement between Karen Muldoon and Summit Ridge Management Group, dated 3 weeks before the HOA voted to suspend her. She hadn't just brought them in for consulting. She'd leased out portions of HOA enforcement rights to them for a monthly fee, paid directly to her. James didn't know it yet. But Karen wasn't just out of control. She was guilty of fraud, unauthorized contracts, and possibly insurance manipulation. And if she had torched her own shed, it wouldn't be the first time someone tried to burn evidence before it burned them. By Sunday morning, the sheriff came back. But this time, not for James. She knocked on Karen's door with 2 deputies. Karen opened it half an inch and refused to step outside. I've done nothing wrong, she yelled. The sheriff calmly replied, Ma'am, you're not under arrest. But we do have a warrant to search your property for insurance fraud, contract tampering, and potential obstruction of investigation. Karen screamed. Literally. A shrill, trembling, echoing sound that startled every crow off every rooftop on Willow Lane. But she still had no choice. The deputies stepped inside, and what they found wasn't just evidence. It was a map. A literal hand-drawn Map of Oakridge Heights, with homes circled, notes scribbled beside them. James' home was in red marker dot, so were for others dot next to his name. Stubborn. Pressure harder. Find code violation or plant one. Next to another. Old couple. Target tree height. They won't fight back. The board hadn't just been a power trip for Karen. It was a tactical game. One she had played like a chess. Master with AFLAMETHROWER dot. And now the pieces were melting. Sheriff Dahlgren called James 2 hours later. I thought you'd want to know. She's not under arrest yet, but it's coming. Her fingerprints are on the lease docs, and there's enough paper trail to make this go federal if it sticks. James let out a slow breath. He wasn't surprised. He was just relieved. But one thing still bothered him. Who left the anonymous envelope? Because it wasn't Karen, and it wasn't Summit Ridge. That warning had come from someone else. Someone still in the shadows. And James had a feeling they weren't finished yet. By the time Monday rolled around, Oakridge Heights felt like a shaken soda can. Karen's fall from grace was the talk of every driveway, every Facebook group, every whispered conversation over white picket fences. Some neighbors pretended they'd always hated her. Others nervously deleted old emails where they'd backed her complaints. But James Turner wasn't celebrating. Because the fire hadn't been the end. It was a distraction. He kept replaying one thing in his mind. That mysterious envelope with his personal information. The warning. The man who delivered it. The badge labeled Summit Ridge Enforcement. Only problem? Sheriff Dahlgren confirmed that Summit Ridge had no record of employing anyone matching his description. So who was he? James sent the porch footage to Olivia. She ran it through facial recognition software her newsroom used for tracking public officials. The result came back within hours. Liam Yates, former regional vice president of Southern Horizon Property Management, a rival firm to Summit Ridge, fired 2 years ago after a whistleblower scandal. James frowned. That didn't make sense. Why would a disgraced former executive be warning him about Karen and Summit Ridge? That night, James took a walk. It had been a while since he actually explored Oakridge Heights. Most of his time had been spent fighting for his right to live there in peace. He passed tidy yards, carefully painted shutters, garden flags that read things like live, laugh, landscape. Then he saw something. The silver Honda Accord, parked neatly in a driveway 2 streets over. The same one from the footage of his first Mustang attack. The car the vandal had driven. It didn't belong to Karen. It belonged to Gregory Alston, a soft-spoken, retired accountant who kept his lawn trimmed with scissors and waved at everyone. He'd never raised his voice, never argued at HOA meetings. A true background character in neighborhood life. But James now saw something different. Gregory's garage door was open slightly, and inside, James spotted a Summit Ridge clipboard. His heart thud. He walked casually past, pretending to check his phone. He noted the license plate, took a photo, then called Olivia again. I need you to check something. The name's Gregory Alston. See if he has ties to Summit Ridge or Southern Horizon. An hour later, she called back. He's not just tied to them, she said. He owns both, quietly, through a shell company. He resigned as CEO 5 years ago after a scandal involving forged permits in Nevada. But he's still pulling strings from the shadows. James's blood ran cold. So Karen wasn't the mastermind, she was the puppet, Olivia replied. Alston installed her years ago. He's been using HOA boards across the state to push families out of homes and grab properties below value, then flipping them under different LLCs. You're not just a guy with a car he doesn't like. You're a roadblock in $1 million pipeline. That was the moment James understood. The stakes, Karen's tantrums, just smoke. The real danger was the man who never raised his voice. The one no one suspected. The guy with a lawn perfect enough to hypnotize you into ignoring his crimes. Gregory Alston had orchestrated it all, and he was still watching. The next day, James found a single manila envelope on his porch. No return address. Inside, a photograph of his Mustang. A new one. Taken at night, close enough to see the reflection in the headlight. Someone's face, Gregory's, and a note. You were warned once. That night, James didn't sleep. He activated the emergency motion sensors Mike had installed. The ones with silent alerts and direct police dispatch access. He reinforced his digital firewall. And then, he called Olivia with one final idea. I need you to help me live stream everything. Everything, she asked. Alston. The corruption. The documents. The threats. The whole story. On camera. From my driveway. I want to live. I want people watching as the snake slithers out. From under his perfect front lawn. Olivia was quiet for a second. Let's go nuclear. James smiled for the first time in days. Because in 24 hours, Oakridge Heights wasn't just going to be a suburb with gossip. It was going to be national news. And Gregory Alston, the man in the shadows, was about to find out what happens when you push the wrong neighbor. It was 6 p.m. on a warm Thursday evening when the camera went live. James Turner stood in his driveway next to the Mustang, freshly washed, polished, to a mirror's shine. His phone, clipped to a tripod, streamed directly to Olivia's news outlet and a public link shared across local forums. Livestream viewers climbed fast. Hundreds, then thousands. Behind him, the neighborhood looked deceptively peaceful. Children played in yards. Dogs barked in the distance. But inside homes, laptops and phones glowed, every neighbor watching the same thing. James. About to speak. About to end the game. He cleared his throat and looked into the camera. My name is James Turner. I moved to Oakridge Heights 6 months ago. I bought a home just outside the HOA boundary. I checked the map. I verified it with my lawyer. I paid for peace. He held up the first photo. The Mustang after it was vandalized. This is what happened after I said no to joining the HOA. I didn't know then who was behind it. I thought it was just a power-hungry neighbor. Someone trying to enforce rules on a home they didn't control. Next, he held up a screenshot from the surveillance footage. The 2 men vandalizing his car. Mugshots next to it. Karen's email ordering the maintenance inspection. Karen Muldoon didn't act alone. She was following orders. Then he showed the lease contract, the fire inspection report, the criminal records tied to the shell company. Finally, James held up the photograph left on his porch, the one taken at night, the one showing Gregory Alston's face reflected in the Mustang's chrome. This man lives to streets over, quiet, polite, soft-spoken. But behind the scenes, he orchestrated harassment, vandalism, threats, even arson. All for money. He's used HOA letters across the state as weapons. Not for safety, for power. Across Oakridge Heights, phones buzzed. The comments section exploded. And then, headlights. A silver Honda rolled up slowly, creeping toward James' driveway. Gregory Alston stepped out. Buttoned shirt, khakis, hands neatly clasped behind his back like he was walking into a Sunday church meeting. James, he said smoothly, this is a mistake. James didn't flinch. Which part? The blackmail, the lies, or the property fraud? You're making this bigger than it is. No. Gregory, you made it bigger. You brought in Summit Ridge. You pressured residents, falsified violations, and used Karen as your puppet. Gregory smiled faintly. And you think go and live changes anything? HOA boards are private entities. You'll be buried in litigation. That's when the sirens wailed. 3 cruisers pulled up behind Gregory's car. Sheriff Dahlgren stepped out, followed by 2 state investigators. Gregory turned, stunned. "Gregory Alston," she said, her voice cold and direct. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, insurance manipulation, property harassment, and unauthorized contracting under a false LLC." Gregory blinked. "You have no jurisdiction. This is civil." "It was," she replied, "until you burned evidence, doctored ownership contracts, and used private investigators to intimidate homeowners off their land." She nodded to her deputies. The handcuffs clicked shut. The camera caught everything. In one final desperate move, Gregory turned to the live stream, face tight with contempt. "You think this makes you a hero?" he hissed at James. "You'll just be another internet blip. People forget." James leaned into the mic. "I didn't do this to be remembered. I did this so the next homeowner knows how to fight." The chat exploded with support. "Legend. This guy just exposed a whole racket. James for HOA president or governor. This is how we take our neighborhoods back." As the cruisers pulled away, Olivia's team faded the live stream to black. But Oakridge Heights didn't go quiet. It changed. Within a week, 4 more residents challenged their HOA contracts. The state launched a deeper investigation into Summit Ridge. Local news outlets picked up the story, and the Mustang rebellion trended on social media. Karen, she vanished. Rumor had it she moved in with her sister in Wisconsin and was suing the HOA for emotional damages. Irony had never hit so hard. Gregory, facing charges in 3 states and IRS investigations for hidden income. Turns out fake HOA invoices add up fast when you're sloppy. And James, he finally got what he came for. Peace. The Mustang stayed in the driveway. No more warnings. No more threats. Just the occasional thumbs up from a passing neighbor and the quiet hum of suburban life. No longer under the boot of a false king. Final call to action. The battle's over, but the lesson stands. Never underestimate a neighbor with the truth, a camera, and the will to stand his ground. Drop a comment if you've ever had an HOA horror story, and hit that like button if you think James got the justice he deserved. Subscribe for more stories where the underdog flips the whole system.